All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Imagining Tech. So, as you may know, for those of you guys who've been watching my channel, I started reading the book The War on Normal People by Andrew Yang. In one of my last videos, I showed the cover. I got it right here. And I actually broke into it. I finally got my chance to break into it. And I read through the introduction, which is not too long. And I also read part one, chapter one, which is titled My Journey. And I actually wanted to just kind of give my breakdown or my summary towards what I've read so far. Now, the introduction starts out actually very interesting. The introduction of the book, honestly, is for those of you guys who've been following Andrew Yang's campaign, very similar to what you would hear during the campaign trail. He talks about, the journey to automation. He talks about a little bit of where he came from, a little bit about the people that he's been chatting with as far as job displacement. One of the interesting things that I read and I wanted to share with you guys is in the book, in the introduction, he writes about a report that was published in December 2016 that predicted 83% of jobs where people make less than $20 per hour will be subject to automation or replacement. Now, that line hit me very hard because that was a report published in 2016, and it says that 83% of jobs that you make less than $20 an hour are subject to automation. So, I'm thinking about it. A lot of people I know personally, I can only speak for myself, but a lot of people I know in my age group, my demographic, that would affect. That's almost virtually, I have a couple friends who make more than that, but it's usually because they have sales jobs or something like that. Um, yeah, so that's a very powerful metric. Um, the book, it talks a lot about automation. It talks a lot about um, Andrew Yang's story. I really like the way he narrates the book. I have the Audible, so I've been listening to him read it as well as following along in the book. But the book is written in a very compassionate way. He really takes you down his journey in the book, and not he kind of makes you feel like you're there. He talks about growing up in public schools and being one of the only Asian kids in his class, and how that felt like and what it felt like to be called names and stuff like that. Stuff that I feel like a lot of people in this country could relate to, especially if you are a minority. So that was very interesting. Um, he talks about all the cities that he's traveled to. He talks about his story as far as starting a company, becoming a lawyer, because at first he became a lawyer. And then at the age of 25, he realized he didn't want to be a lawyer. So then he jumped into a software company in the early 2000s. And that actually failed. So that was probably one of his first big failures. So you can imagine, having a successful career as a lawyer and then going to try and become an entrepreneur during the dot-com bubble. And a lot of people during that time had failed businesses. There were only a few businesses that actually survived that dot-com bubble. And another thing too you got to think about is both his parents were successful academics. His mom was a statistics teacher, and his dad had several patents and it was college educated. Um, he talks a lot about Venture for America. That part was super interesting. He talks about his company, Venture for America, and how he worked all across the country trying to create jobs for people, trying to um, help people become entrepreneurships and start businesses. And he thinks that's the actually the most effective way to teach people is through apprenticeship, because that's the way he learned, sort of, a mentorship. And that's sort of what his company provided. Venture for America was all about helping young entrepreneurs in all different communities, Black, Latino, every community, build themselves up and create businesses that are going to jumpstart the economy, in all these different places and create more job growth. Because that's ultimately what we need, right? We need more people thinking outside of the box. We need more and more people taking that entrepreneurship role, because as automation increases, the demand for a workforce, the demand for a, just a labor force is going to, start to drop off and go down. So I just find it very interesting because, right now, with the way society is, a lot of people have complaints with the way the school system is. And Robert Kiyosaki talks about it all the time. The school system is pretty much designed to just train people to be employees. And, I really like the work he was doing in Venture for America because it was more geared towards training people to be entrepreneurs, and independent entrepreneurs. And there's so much opportunity. That's just from my perspective. Like, I see there's just so much opportunity to really, you know, and again, there's nothing wrong with working for somebody else, working for a paycheck while you have to, you know what I mean? But then, building whatever you want to build on the side, because there's so many opportunities, and really the economy needs independent entrepreneurs. So, yeah, he talks a lot about, he talks a lot about, as far as when he got to talk to President Obama, and he talked to President Obama, and he felt like, in a sense, like conflicting, because he was high on life. He had all this success. He was talking to the president. He had just married his wife. He had kids, and he had all this level of success, but something was nagging him, and it was that he knew in reality that all of the work he was doing was kind of for naught, or it was kind of a waste. There was no real, it kind of didn't sit right with him. He felt bad about it, because he knew at the end of the day, in the next 10 to 15 years, a lot of these jobs will be taken out. And not even just the low paying jobs, the jobs that make less than $20 an hour, also the white collar jobs, and also, just jobs as a whole, truckers, any sort of driver, cashiers, anybody who works in finance is going to be software. Anybody who does any sort of office work is going to eventually be automated away. And this is the reality. And he talks a lot about getting ahead of this trend. He thinks it's very important to get ahead of this trend rather than be behind this trend, because these things are going to happen whether we like it or not. These changes are going to affect us at the end of the day, regardless of how we feel about it. So his pretty much perspective on it is, let's get ahead of this trend rather than trying to play catch up later. And I'm going to go ahead and read this part from the book, this little excerpt from the book, because I thought this was important. It says, I remember the moment it finally sank in completely. I was reading a CNN article that detailed how automation had eliminated millions of manufacturing jobs between 2000 and 2015, 4 times more than globalization. Now, I just want to highlight that, the 2000 era was really the height of the tech bubble. And then, between 2000 and 2015, we saw a lot of the companies that came out of that. And a lot of those companies were eliminating manufacturing jobs, as well as, people think it's just globalization, or it's just, NAFTA, or whatever the case may be. And they blame the Clintons, and that's a whole separate thing. But a lot of these jobs actually did get eliminated through automation. So that's important to note. And he said 4 times more than globalization. I had walked through many of the cities that had previously been home to those jobs: Cleveland, Cincinnati, Indianapolis, Detroit, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, Baltimore, and their surrounding areas. I knew what my friends were working on and what was coming down the road. As I felt the pieces fall into place, my heart sank and my mind raced. Nothing will stop us. We had decimated the economies and cultures of these regions, and we were set to do the same to many others. In response, American lives and families are falling apart. Rampant financial stress is the new normal. We are in the third or fourth inning of the greatest economic shift in the history of mankind, and no one seems to be talking about it or doing anything in response. I spent the past 6 years trying to address these problems by helping growth companies create jobs in different regions and training entrepreneurs. It has been my job for the past 6 years to create jobs. I'm about to lose, we're all about to lose on an epic scale. I'm now certain that the wave, the great displacement, is already here and is having effects bigger and faster than most anyone believes. The most pernicious thing about this wave is that you can't really tell who it has hit as it grinds up people and communities. I have switched gears. My goal now is to give everyone a sense of what's coming and then prepare us to fight for the version of the future that we want. It will be a massive challenge. It's up to us. The market will not help us. Indeed, it is about to turn on us. The solutions aren't beyond us yet, but it's getting late in the day and the time is running short. I need you to see what I see. And that is how the chapter ends, the first chapter of my journey. And so, just some food for thought to talk a little bit more about that last excerpt. You know, he's seems very it seems to be very urgent for Andrew Yang that we all see that this vision of the future is coming. And another thing is, the free market in a lot of ways. I preach, I praise the free market constantly, all the time. I think the free market, really has been one of the greatest benefits to humankind. But as Andrew Yang talks about the free market, and he says that the free market will actually, it's going to value productivity. It's going to value production. It's not going to value well-beings of humans. It's not going to value human basic needs. It's going to value cost effectiveness, being able to lower costs, and with the tools that are going to be available coming to us in the next coming years, it will be very possible to get rid of all these jobs. And what is likely to happen, according to Andrew Yang, is we will, have a class of people who are doing very well and who are benefiting greatly from this new wave. And there will be a class of people who are displaced from their jobs, who won't be able to be retrained, and therefore it will be a sort of gap. Um, so I'm guessing, he's going to get in pretty soon about where his freedom dividend fits into all of this. This is just chapter one. Remember the introduction and chapter one. So I'm guessing he's going to get into soon how his freedom dividend relates into all of this. But, I do feel encouraged that if you look throughout human history, this might be a place where I slightly disagree with Andrew Yang. Um, there's always been new economies that form, always. And this is not to say um, that I can see the future or anything like that. I just feel like there will be a new economy that is forming. In fact, I already see it forming. Online, there's an online community forming for every single industry. So I do think a lot of the jobs will be replaced with online identities and online communities and online participation. But it is very important that as a community, we acknowledge all of the changes that are happening every single day and how it's going to affect us going forward and into the future. And these are all very real statistics. Um, I do agree largely with a lot of the points Andrew Yang is making so far in the introduction and the first chapter, as far as the cry for help. He talks about Donald Trump's election in late 2016. To him, it felt like a cry for help. Um, America is starting 100,000 fewer businesses per year than it was only 12 years ago. So there's less and less businesses being started. It's becoming harder and harder for the small business entrepreneur to start a business. So that's not really good. So, I'm looking forward to continue to reading the book. This is just my breakdown from the first chapter, and I'm sure, a lot of dots will be connected.